You have 7 apps tracking your tasks, 3 different calendars, a bullet journal gathering dust on your desk, and somehow you're still behind on everything. The promise was simple: adopt the right system, and you'll finally get your life together. But every productivity method comes with its own psychology, its own failure modes, and its own way of making you feel worse when it doesn't work. Some systems turn you into a robot. Others drown you in busy work about the work. A few actually help, but only if you understand what they're really doing to your brain. Number 1, getting things done. GTD. David Allen's Getting Things Done works like an external hard drive for your brain. You capture every commitment, task, and idea into a trusted system, process it through a specific workflow, organize it by context, and review everything weekly. The psychology is brilliant because your brain stops nagging you about that dentist appointment or that email you need to send, since it trusts the system to remember. You feel immediate relief when you do your first brain dump, like setting down a heavy backpack. But GTD demands religious devotion to the weekly review, and most people abandon it within 2 months because maintaining the system becomes a part-time job. You spend Sunday afternoons moving tasks between lists instead of doing them. The system works perfectly if you have the discipline of a Zen monk and actually enjoy administrative work. But for everyone else, it becomes productivity theater where you're always organizing and never executing. Number 2, time blocking. Time blocking means treating your calendar like a Tetris game, where every hour has an owner. You assign specific tasks to specific time slots. And when 2 p.m. arrives, you write that report, whether you feel like it or not. This fights back against the myth of finding time for important work, because you never find it, you only allocate it. The method works exceptionally well for deep work and creative projects that need uninterrupted focus. You can't check email during your 9 a.m. writing block because the calendar says you're writing, and the calendar is law. But time blocking falls apart the moment reality intervenes. One urgent meeting blows up your entire day, and suddenly you're playing calendar Jenga, moving blocks around while getting nothing done. You also discover that your brain doesn't care what the calendar says. When the 3 p.m. coding block arrives and your brain wants to research random facts about penguins, the calendar loses. The rigid structure creates guilt when you deviate, and you'll deviate constantly because you're human. Number 3, eat that frog. Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog philosophy says do the hardest, most important task first thing in the morning, before anything else. The logic is simple. If you eat a live frog first thing, nothing worse can happen to you the rest of the day. Your willpower and decision-making ability are highest in the morning, so that's when you tackle the task you've been avoiding for 3 weeks. This works beautifully for people who struggle with procrastination on big projects. You finish the awful thing while you still have energy, and the rest of your day feels easy by comparison. But this method assumes you always know what your frog is, and you don't. Sometimes your morning brain needs to ease in with simple tasks to build momentum. Sometimes the urgent fire actually is the priority, and eating your frog means ignoring a real crisis. The biggest problem is that it trains you to view important work as punishment, something to be endured rather than engaged with. And that's a terrible relationship to build with your goals. Number 4, Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique breaks work into 25-minute sprints followed by 5-minute breaks, with a longer break after 4 sprints. You set a timer, work with full focus until it rings, then step away. The magic is in the constraint. 25 minutes feels doable even when you're dreading a task. And the timer creates artificial urgency that fights procrastination. The forced breaks prevent burnout and keep your brain fresh. This method excels for tasks you find boring or overwhelming because you're never more than 25 minutes away from relief. But Pomodoro is terrible for deep work that requires hours of unbroken concentration. Getting into flow state takes 15 minutes, and the timer yanks you out right when you're hitting your stride. You spend more time managing the timer than working. It also creates a Pavlovian anxiety, where you're always aware of the countdown, never fully immersed. The technique is training wheels for focus. useful when you're learning to concentrate, but limiting once you develop the ability to work in longer stretches. Number 5. Kanban boards. Kanban visualizes your work as cards moving across columns. To do, doing, done. You see everything at once, and the board tells you what to work on next based on what's in the doing column. This system comes from Toyota's manufacturing floors, designed to prevent bottlenecks and overproduction. The visual nature satisfies your brain's love of progress, and moving a card to done triggers a small dopamine hit. You can spot problems immediately when cards pile up in one column. But Kanban requires constant maintenance and becomes overwhelming when you have more than 20 active items. You spend time categorizing and moving cards instead of completing actual work. The system also fails to capture priority or urgency well, treating buy groceries and finish client proposal as equivalent cards. Digital Kanban boards add another problem. You need to remember to check them. And if you forget for a few days, the board becomes outdated fiction. The method works best for teams with shared accountability, less well for individuals who need the board to also nag them. Number 6, the Eisenhower matrix. The Eisenhower matrix divides tasks into 4 quadrants based on urgency and importance. Urgent and important, do now. Important but not urgent, schedule. Urgent but not important, delegate. Neither urgent nor important, eliminate. The system forces you to think critically about whether tasks actually matter or just feel pressing. Most people spend their lives in the urgent quadrants, firefighting constantly, while the important but not urgent quadrant is where actual progress on goals happens. The matrix is excellent for gaining perspective on where your time actually goes versus where it should go, but applying it requires brutal honesty about what's truly important versus what feels important. And most people lack that honesty. Everything feels urgent when it's in front of you. The matrix also requires someone else to delegate to, which solopreneurs don't have. You'll correctly identify that 60% of your tasks should be eliminated or delegated. Then do all of them anyway because you feel guilty or don't trust others. The framework is diagnostic, showing you the problem, but it doesn't solve the underlying inability to say no. Number 7, bullet journaling. Bullet journaling combines to-do lists, calendar, diary, and goal tracking in one analog notebook, using a specific notation system. You create daily logs, monthly spreads, and collections for different life areas, all customizable to your needs. The method's power comes from the act of writing by hand, which forces slower, more intentional thinking about your commitments. You can't mindlessly add 47 tasks like you can in a digital app. The creative aspect appeals to people who find regular productivity systems sterile. And flipping through past pages provides a satisfying record of what you've accomplished. But bullet journaling becomes an art project. You spend hours designing elaborate monthly spreads with watercolors and washi tape, and the journal itself becomes another task requiring maintenance. Miss a few days and you feel guilty about the blank pages, so you avoid opening it entirely. The analog format means you can't search, can't set reminders, and carry another object everywhere. The system works beautifully for people who genuinely enjoy journaling as a practice. But for everyone else, it's productivity cosplay. Number 8, the 2-minute rule. If a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately instead of adding it to a list. This comes from GTD, but stands alone as a principle. The rule fights the insidious problem of list bloat, where your to-do list fills with tiny tasks that take longer to track than to complete. You spend more mental energy remembering to respond to that email than just responding. The immediate action also prevents small tasks from piling into an overwhelming mountain. But the 2-minute rule becomes a trap when you're trying to do deep work. An email comes in, you apply the rule, then another quick task appears, and suddenly your morning disappears in 2-minute increments. You never get to the important work because you're optimizing for clearing trivial tasks. The rule also trains you to prioritize speed over importance, doing whatever's fast instead of what matters. It works well during processing time, terrible during focused work time. But most people don't separate those contexts clearly enough. Number 9. Deep work scheduling. Cal Newport's deep work method blocks off 3 to 4 hour chunks for cognitively demanding work in distraction-free environments. No phone, no internet, no meetings, just you and the hard problem. The philosophy is that the ability to focus intensely on difficult tasks is becoming rare and therefore valuable. One deep work session produces more quality output than a week of scattered attention. This method works extraordinarily well for knowledge workers, creatives, and anyone building something complex. You make more progress in one morning than most people make in a week. But deep work requires structural privilege that many people lack. You need control over your schedule, a door that closes, and work that allows long, uninterrupted blocks. Parents, shift workers, and people in reactive jobs can't suddenly block 4 hours daily. The method also ignores that some valuable work is shallow but necessary, and treating it as lesser creates resentment. Deep work scheduling is the productivity system for people whose biggest problem is too much focus time, not too little. Number 10. The Ivy Lee method. A consultant named Ivy Lee told a steel executive to write down the 6 most important tasks for tomorrow, number them by priority, and work through them in order without distraction. Don't move to task 2 until task 1 is complete. This method from 1918 still works because it solves decision fatigue. You decide priorities once, when your brain is fresh. Then execute without questioning. The limit of 6 tasks prevents overwhelm and forces you to confront what actually matters. You can't hide behind a 30-item list pretending you'll get to everything. But the method fails when priorities shift midday or when tasks take wildly different amounts of time. You finish tasks 1 through 3 by 10 a.m., or you're still on task 1 at 5 p.m. The strict ordering creates guilt when you skip around based on energy or context, even when that's the smart move. The method assumes you have accurate intuition about task priority and duration, and most people don't until they've already done the work. Number 11. Inbox zero. Inbox zero means processing every email until your inbox is empty, using a specific set of actions. Delete, delegate, respond, defer, or do. The goal isn't compulsive email checking, but treating your inbox as a temporary holding area, not a to-do list. When implemented correctly, you process email in batches at set times and trust that everything requiring action has been moved to your actual task system. The psychological benefit is eliminating the vague anxiety of 3,847 unread messages, each potentially containing something important. But Inbox Zero becomes a compulsion. You interrupt real work to process email so you can see that satisfying empty inbox. Even though the empty inbox accomplishes nothing, you also train others that you respond immediately, which increases email volume and urgency expectations. The method works if you receive 20 to 30 emails daily and have clear action systems. It creates anxiety and busy work if you receive 100 plus emails or work in an organization that uses email as their primary communication tool for everything. Number 12. Time tracking and analysis. Time tracking means logging exactly how you spend every hour, usually in 15-minute increments, to understand where your time actually goes versus where you think it goes. The gap is always alarming. You believe you spend 20 hours weekly on focused work, but the data shows 6 hours, with the rest consumed by meetings, email, and somehow scrolling Twitter. This awareness is powerful because you can't optimize what you don't measure. Seeing that you spent 11 hours in meetings last week makes it easier to say no to the next meeting request. But time tracking adds overhead to every activity and creates a surveillance relationship with yourself. You're constantly asking, what am I doing right now that I need to log? Which pulls you out of flow and makes work feel like you're billing a client, even when you're not. The data also depresses you when you see how much time you waste, without necessarily providing solutions. You learn you're inefficient, then feel bad about being inefficient, then waste more time feeling bad. Number 13. The Seinfeld strategy. Jerry Seinfeld's productivity method is simple. Put a big X on your calendar every day you do the target behavior, and don't break the chain. You want to write daily, so you write daily and mark the X. And after 2 weeks of X's, breaking the chain feels terrible. The streak becomes self-reinforcing. This method leverages loss aversion and identity. You're not trying to finish a novel. You're someone who writes every day, and missing breaks that identity. The visual chain provides satisfaction and momentum, but the strategy makes the streak more important than the work. You write garbage for 10 minutes just to maintain the chain, even when you should be editing or researching. You also create a fragile system where one missed day, because you're sick or traveling, destroys your streak and your motivation collapses. The method works well for building habits where consistency matters more than intensity. Terrible for complex projects where sometimes the right move is not doing the daily task. Number 14. Autopilot schedules. Autopilot scheduling means having the same schedule every week. Mondays are always admin and planning. Tuesdays and Thursdays are client work. Wednesdays are deep work on your own projects. Fridays are meetings and wrapping up. You never decide what to work on. You just look at what day it is. This eliminates decision fatigue and creates a rhythm where different types of work get consistent attention. Your brain knows Wednesday is deep work day and prepares accordingly. But autopilot schedules require a level of control over your time that most jobs don't allow. You can't tell your boss that Tuesdays are your client work days when they need you in a meeting. The rigidity also prevents capitalizing on momentum. You're on a roll with a project Wednesday night, but Thursday is client day, so you stop. The schedule becomes the master instead of the servant. This works perfectly for entrepreneurs and freelancers with control over their calendar and creates frustration for everyone else who has external scheduling demands. Number 15. Zero-based calendaring. Most people add tasks to their existing commitments until they're drowning. Zero-based calendaring works backwards. Start with a blank calendar and only add what truly matters, questioning every commitment. Every meeting, every recurring task, every obligation must justify its existence. If you can't articulate why it matters, it doesn't go on the calendar. This method forces brutal prioritization and reveals how much of your schedule is legacy commitments you forgot to question. You discover you're attending a weekly meeting that stopped being useful 8 months ago, but nobody canceled. The practice creates breathing room by default, rather than by exhaustion. But it requires saying no, constantly, often to people with power over you. You can't zero-base your calendar when your job demands attendance at specific meetings, or when family obligations aren't optional. The method also assumes you have good judgment about what matters, and people are notoriously bad at predicting what will be important 3 months from now. You ruthlessly eliminate something that turns out to be critical, or you protect something that wastes months of your life.